All right, so are you ready for this? Today we are diving headfirst into Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil.
Oh, yeah. This one's a big one.
It's like wrestling with, well, one of philosophy's most intense thinkers.
People get a little intimidated by Nietzsche. But honestly, what I find so fascinating about him is that he really just wanted us to, actually live, really examine what it means to be human. And he doesn't beat around the bush. He jumps right in, takes on dogmatic philosophy from page one.
Yeah, he goes after Plato's pure spirit, calls it a nightmare Europe's finally waking up from.
Right.
It's not exactly subtle, but I don't know. There's something kind of exciting about it. It's like he's challenging us, right? So what was it about these big systems, these grand claims of absolute truth that he had such a problem with?
Well, it's more than just him being a contrarian, though, he does love to provoke a bit. Nietzsche really saw these really rigid systems, these structures, as traps. He's pushing us to embrace the questions, the uncertainty, because that's where real understanding lives, in that messy, exciting space.
So ditch the dogma, check. But then where do you even start to build your own understanding? I mean, especially when he goes on to say that even our senses, the things we use to, experience the world, can deceive us.
Totally. It's like, whoa, okay, my head's spinning a little bit.
Right.
He even gives this example of mishearing a foreign word to show how much of what we call truth is really just our own interpretation, colored by everything we bring with us, our experiences, our background, even our desires.
It makes you wonder if we're all just making up reality as we go along.
He has this line that always makes me stop and think. It's, from our fundamental nature and from remote ages, we have been accustomed to lying.
Whoa, accustomed to lying.
Yeah.
That's a heavy thought.
Right. But it's provocative. It makes you question everything.
Okay, so how are we supposed to navigate a world where everyone has their own version of truth? And I feel like this is where his idea of master morality versus slave morality comes in, right?
It's such a powerful way of understanding how different values have shaped human history. Like master morality, Nietzsche sees that as being about power, about creating values. There's this kind of noble drive there. The warrior, the artist, the one who forges their own path.
And then you have slave morality, which values compassion, humility, helping those in need. Are those two moralities always at odds with each other?
It's not so much that one is inherently better than the other. It's more about recognizing that this tension between these different sets of values exists and how they play out in individuals and societies. Think about it. A warrior culture versus, say, a society built on religious ideals. Those are totally different ideas about what's good, what's right.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how those different moralities play out in the world. Okay, but so if Nietzsche's questioning this idea of traditional morality,
Yeah.
is he saying that there's no right or wrong? Like, it's all relative?
Well, that's a common misinterpretation. He's not advocating for a free-for-all. He just wants us to dig a little deeper. Instead of just accepting those simple labels, right and wrong, what are the underlying motives? What are the power dynamics at play?
Okay, so it's like peeling back the layers, looking beyond just the surface of what we call good and evil. Question everything.
Yeah. That questioning, that willingness to challenge conventional thinking, that's where things get really interesting, especially when we get to his idea of the will to power, right? That feels like the core of his whole philosophy.
Right, but it's also one of the most misunderstood aspects of his work.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Because people hear will to power, and they automatically think domination, aggression, but it's so much more nuanced than that.
So what is the will to power really about?
At its core, it's the fundamental energy that animates all living things. It's that drive to grow, to learn, to create, to overcome challenges. It's about reaching for our full potential. It's about embracing life in its entirety, the beauty and the struggles.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful concept.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's something that we'll unpack in more detail as we, go deeper into Nietzsche's thinking. But for now.
So we talked about Nietzsche challenging dogma, his take on truth, and that whole master morality versus slave morality thing. But there's something else going on underneath all that. The will to power. How does that work in a world where, like we were saying, everyone's got their own truth?
Oh, man, that is the question, isn't it? And it's one Nietzsche really wrestled with. He sees this will to power as like the engine, right? This energy that drives everything we do, everything societies do, and it's not always about being dominant, it's about pushing yourself, taking on challenges, striving for something bigger.
Okay, so personal growth, creativity,
Yeah.
reaching your potential. But how do we all do that without stepping on each other? If everyone's striving for power, doesn't that just lead to conflict?
Yeah, it's tricky for sure. Nietzsche knew the will to power could be destructive if we weren't careful. But he's not shying away from that. He wants us to be aware of how power works in ourselves, in the world, and then use that awareness to make choices that lead to, you know, a better existence for everyone.
And that kind of leads us to another one of his big ideas, the Ubermensch, which honestly I think it's thrown around and misunderstood a lot. What is the Ubermensch really?
It's not like Superman, not a specific person or even type of person. Think of it more like an ideal, a vision of what humans could be. This Ubermensch, they've gone beyond those old ideas of morality, right? They make their own path, create new values.
So more like a goal, something to strive for, evolving beyond who we are now.
Exactly. It's not about bossing people around, but about being the author of your own life.
Hmm.
You have that power within you to make something amazing.
So power over yourself, not over others. The power to create, to become the best version of yourself.
Right. Nietzsche's not saying go conquer the world, but conquer yourself, figure out what you're capable of, and then use that power to create something incredible.
That's really powerful. And it goes back to the will to power, right? Like the Ubermensch is the one who can take all that energy and use it for something meaningful.
Yes. And it's a journey, not a destination.
Hmm.
This constant becoming, this self-discovery, questioning, pushing your limits.
Don't get comfortable. Keep moving, keep creating, keep evolving.
Exactly. And that's not always easy or fun, but it's worth it.
Now, we keep coming back to this will to power and the Ubermensch, but how does all this fit with Nietzsche's problems with traditional morality? What didn't he like about it?
His big beef was that so much of traditional morality, especially the kind that comes from like religion or rigid systems, it kind of weakens us.
Really?
Yeah, he saw it as this thing that makes you deny your own power, makes you focus on being humble, self-sacrificing, just following the rules someone else made.
So it's not that compassion or helping others is bad, but that blindly following these moral codes, that's what we need to examine.
Exactly. Decide for yourself what you value, don't just accept what you're told.
And that's where those master and slave moralities come back in.
For sure. He saw those as always pushing and pulling on each other, shaping societies in different ways. And he thought that slave morality, with all the compassion and forgiveness, had become really dominant in the modern world.
But again, not that those are bad things in themselves. It's more that they might be holding us back from reaching our full potential.
Yes. Think about those values, how they affect you, your choices, your life.
This is where it gets really exciting because he's not just complaining, he's giving us new ways to see the world, to live in it, to find meaning. He's like a philosophical revolutionary.
Totally. He wants us to break free from all that's holding us back. It's challenging, but so rewarding.
So we've talked about his critique of morality, this vision of a new kind of human, but what about beyond good and evil specifically? What are some of the big takeaways from this book?
One thing that's really important to remember is Beyond Good and Evil isn't just a regular philosophy book. It's a work of art.
What do you mean?
It's in the way he writes. It's full of metaphors, irony, wit. He's not just presenting arguments. He's creating a whole world of meaning with his words.
So it's an experience, not just a lecture. You have to feel it to get it.
Exactly. Engage with it on an emotional level, not just an intellectual one.
So beyond good and evil is an experience. You've got to feel it, not just think about it. But it also has this reputation for being, well, kind of hard to understand. What advice do you have for someone trying to, crack the Nietzsche code?
Honestly, don't be afraid to just get lost in it for a bit. Nietzsche, he was suspicious of anything too simple. He wanted you to really work through the ideas, find those aha moments on your own terms.
So put down the spark notes.
Yeah. If you want the full impact, slow down. Read a passage. Maybe read it again. Let those ideas really sink in.
It's like, how some meals you just want to savor every bite.
Exactly. And speaking of savoring, Nietzsche was big on that with art and beauty, too. Saw it as essential for really living life to the fullest.
Which might surprise people who think he's all doom and gloom, right? But it makes sense. Art challenges us, moves us, can even change us.
Absolutely. And it gives us this different kind of knowledge, a different way of being in the world. Nietzsche thought art could get at truths that, just thinking about them couldn't touch.
Engaging all of you, all your senses to understand yourself, your place. It's about, like, a more embodied existence, right? Maybe that's even what the will to power was getting at all along. Not just achievement, but really experiencing life in all its messy glory.
I love that. That's it right there. And it's what keeps Nietzsche relevant. He's not handing us answers, but tools to find our own meaning, build our own values, create our own lives.
A toolkit for the soul, 21st century edition.
Exactly. And like any good toolkit, it's got everything you need to build something amazing, but the real creation, that's on you.
So for anyone listening who's been putting off Nietzsche, thinking he's too intimidating.
Don't. He's a challenge, sure, but so rewarding. You'll never think the same way again.
A wake-up call, a good shake-up, maybe even a little brain-bending fun.
All of that. But more than anything, it's an invitation. Think for yourself, create your own meaning, live a life that is truly yours.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. Go forth, everyone, and find your own path beyond those old categories. Thanks for listening.